Okay, we're going to commence the meeting now. And Andy, we'll begin by the call of order. This is Jeff Applebaum, the project manager for the project, facilitating the meeting. We are both on Zoom for members of the steering committee and their staff and delegates, and we're also on live stream for the public view. I'll begin with the call to order. So if you can orally respond as I call your name. First of all, for the city of Cleveland, Mayor Jackson, Barbara Lang-Henry. I saw Barbara.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that, Jeff.
That's okay, Barbara. That's right. And then the county executive.
I'm here.
For the sheriff today, who is speaking for the sheriff today?
Joe Greiner and Bob Corey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Couldn't get off mute. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So I'm the delegate for the sheriff, but the sheriff will be joining me in executive session.
Okay, thank you, Bob. For the council president.
Gallagher.
Let's do Mike Gallagher. Okay, for the county council. Here. For city council.
Kelly is here.
Okay, thank you. For the Cleveland clerk of courts, Kim Bates, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, for the county clerk of courts.
I'm here, Jeff. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mila. And then we did hear from Mike Gallagher for council. We heard from, let's see, County Executive Arman for the, we heard for the sheriff. We heard for municipal clerk of courts, common pleas court judge. We heard from from both judges. I think Judge Sean Roos is also on as an alternate here today. For the domestic relations court, Judge Celebrezzi.
Jim Zach for Judge Celebrezzi.
Jim Zach, sir, that's right. And then is Judge Early here for the municipal court?
Yes, Judge Early's here.
Okay, and for the public defender, Mr. Sweeney, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're here for the prosecutor, Mr. O'Malley?
I'm here.
Okay, and I think that is our group. Thank you. Just a little bit on housekeeping and protocol today. So what we're going to be doing is we're moving through a relatively a quick-paced agenda. In a few minutes, we'll be just giving updates on diversion, an update on central booking. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk briefly. Andy is going to talk briefly about our plan to get back into the continuation of court planning, court facility planning, and what we're going to do there. And then we're going to move into the jail, and we have 3 steps on the jail today. First of all, I'm going to make one statement here. We're going to review the jail program. It says the final jail program. It is only final in the sense of it's the work product of our programmer. It is still a preliminary program. So the way this process works is we get to the end of this phase, we have a preliminary program. Once the criteria architect comes on board, their first job is to, we go through a process known as program confirmation. And then that becomes the final program, and that's when you vote on a program. But right now, it's really the final work product, which is the preliminary program. So we'll go through that. I'll then take a couple minutes after that to talk about our next steps for implementation of the correction center. This is based on what we've already passed. I'll mention what's going on with the criteria architect, and then we get into the issue of site evaluation. At that point, we will take a vote to move into executive committee, executive session, in order to discuss the process for site acquisition, which is appropriate matter for executive session. I have asked, and I'm going to say this one more time, the members of the executive committee, or the members of the steering committee, I should say, move into executive session. They are entitled to designate those who, either by staff or their delegate, they feel important to be with them in that session. I have asked for those invitations, and I have those. I'm only inviting those in that a executive or that a steering committee member has asked me to invite in. That's the way the process works. And I have the listing. If there's anybody to be added to that, because there's been an oversight, you can send me an email, and hopefully I'll look at it before we move to that session. What we will do is, right before we move into that session, we will take a break, a bio break, and you'll leave your computers on, those who go into the session, and I'll move you into a special room, which is the confidential room, where we will have that session. We will then return, and we will adjourn. The one thing I did fail to mention is that we will have public comment. Steve Zanoni is collecting comments. If anybody is listening in, if you've already given a public comment on any of these topics, we will read it at Roman numeral 4. If during the session you have an additional comment, send your email to Steve Zanoni at the his email was on the first page of the agenda, and we will then read that comment after the executive session. If you obviously don't want to stick around to listen to those comments, when we post the meeting on the website, your public comments will be on the website. So with that in mind, Andy, if we can go back up to the, well, I guess we are at the point right now on the agenda of seeing if there are any public comments that we have before we start these topics. So Steve Zanoni, do you have any comments that you want to read into the record as we start?
Yes, I do, Jeff. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you just fine.
Thank you. We received one public comment from William Tarter, Jr. The public comment is as follows. Good morning, Mr. Applebaum. I'm submitting this question as a private citizen and not a representative of my employer. My question is, back in November, I urged the Justice Center Steering Committee to develop a public engagement process regarding potential sites of the new facility. I was told that there will be a public engagement process, and it was of critical importance, and that it would be part of the next committee meeting. I appreciated that response. During today's meeting, can you provide the latest on the public engagement process, the method and the timeline, and how the committee and consultants plan to meaningfully collect responses from citizens who may wish to offer feedback and input on potential placement sites? Any update would be helpful and appreciated. Thank you. William Tarter, Jr., Broadview Heights, Ohio.
Okay, thank you. And that is an excellent question. And it is a question that we will be talking about public engagement. We felt it appropriate to have this first executive session with the entire committee to talk through the process and to talk through properties. And we will come back to that public engagement session and how we're going to do that after we've had the opportunity to talk in executive session. But that's an excellent question, and it is an important consideration for the public to have involvement as we get into the selection process. So that's a great question, and we will certainly come back to that. So with that in mind, Andy, well, we're going to start out actually now with diversion, and what I would like to do is move to that section, and I believe Curtis is going to give us the summary on diversion. Is that correct?
Jeff, actually, I think Brandy's on the call.
Oh, Brandy's on the call also? Okay, hi, Brandy. So why don't you guys kind of walk through and just give us an update as to where we are on the diversion program.
I saw her on the list, Jeff. I think she may be on mute. Brandy, are you there?
I am, thank you. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Curtis. I was on mute. Thank you.
Okay.
So we do just have a few slides. Are you able to?
Yes, we see them.
So again, Brandy Carney with the County Executive's Office. So we just wanted to provide a little background. It's been a aggressive year working through the diversion program and process, so some background in where we're at right now. And most of you have some of this background, but in 2019, 2020, the county, along with Pulitzer, Bogart, and Associates, completed, Pulitzer did an exhaustive study of 5 years worth of data that had been provided to them by the county Department of IT Services, as well as by Metro Hospital. And at that time, they really were looking on, focusing on population, the SMI population, or serious mental illness, the SMI substance abuse population, so those with co-occurring disease, as well as a substance abuse population. So 3 individual groups. And looking to see how there might be better opportunities to serve those individuals. They did at that time, throughout the data they received, looked back into nonviolent individuals with nonviolent history, people without, an exhaustive criminal history, and identified at that time that approximately 50 individuals from each group could be possibly served here in Cuyahoga County, diverted from jail. And that was kind of the number that seemed from the data that was received that would work well. And as you can see on the slides, I'm not going to obviously read them all, but there was recommended diversion services through a whole continuum, and that was prior to us even being specific to the RFP that we subsequently released. If you want to move to the next slide, Jeff. So September of 2020, so quickly came around. That's when we, over the past year, did focus on our diversion process. As you all do know, the focus is on pre-arrest for diversion. So there's multiple different intercept points as how they're termed that individuals could be diverted, but pre-arrest, so prior to anyone having to even start a possible criminal background that might be the first time for them, that there were opportunities to provide some needed mental health and or addiction services to these individuals. The RFP process that we did have, we ultimately released 2 RFPs throughout the year. The second RFP, we did receive 2 very good, very collaborative responses. And ultimately, the decision with, or the selected vendor was the Adams Board. Going to move to the next one. So many of you have seen this. The Adams Board, we signed a contract with late last year that will be managing the diversion center and the program itself. However, the day-to-day operations at the center itself and the staff at the center will be the Oriana House. So the contract really has 3 components to it, large components to it. It is a 2-year contract that we signed with Adams Board. Our contract with it is only with them. They are subcontracting with Oriana. Again, it's a 2-year contract. We really, and I touch on this a little bit later, but this was an opportunity to get things up and running very quickly. We're excited that April 1st of this year, we're planning on having the doors to the diversion center open. So we are still pursuing options of building out a new facility that has more space and room for expansion. But this was really a great opportunity to get something immediately available to us. The $9.2 million for the contract also includes some Medicaid reimbursement that we'll receive. So it actually ultimately turns out to be less than the 9.2 for the 2 years. The 3 components are Frontline Services, who many of you will know have been great here in Cuyahoga County 30 years. They will provide a 24/7 call-in helpline for law enforcement throughout the county. We also, within the contract, have trainers being hired through the Adams Board. They are able to conduct crisis intervention training for any officer throughout the county who is able to attend the training. That includes both a 40-hour training as well as an 8-hour refresher. And there's also an opportunity for dispatchers in addition to law enforcement. So again, the Adams does the CIT training. The officers, in addition to receiving the training on dealing with individuals with mental health and/or addiction, they're also able to call into the helpline 24/7, discuss with the social worker or the behavioral health worker that's on the phone about the individual and whether or not they may be a good fit for the diversion center and taking them directly there. And again, at the diversion center itself, the officers would be met by the Oriana staff. The Frontline Services, just a little update there, in the process of hiring 5 individuals. I think all but one right now they've hired for operating the 24/7 helpline. The intent is to serve the entire county, so all law enforcement. We obviously expect and hope, just by the numbers, that Cleveland will be the largest user, obviously, of the center and the services. But this is, again, for law enforcement countywide. Again, as I mentioned before, there's 3 populations that we're really focusing on here. And again, it's pre-arrest stage. If someone doesn't have the opportunity, or it's a missed opportunity and they don't go to the diversion center and they end up going to the jail, that's where, again, Bob's group and many of you are working on central booking, and there's another opportunity to divert them, after the arrest. But this focus is on the pre-arrest stage at the beginning. We want to focus on that law enforcement officers, and we've been very specific to Oriana House that they show up. It's a quick process. Within 5 minutes, they're able to get in and out. We want to make sure that, that we're supportive of their needs and they can get in and out quickly so that they can get back on the street. The length of stay for individuals at the diversion center is 5 to 7 days, up to 9 at the most. The intention of the center and the 50 beds that we reduced to start with 50 beds within the center is for acute needs. It's for addiction detoxification needs, stabilization for mental health individuals. So that 5 to 7 days is the only on-site time that they would have at the center. From there, individuals would then be immediately transported and sent to another residential facility to finish their recovery and to finish their residential treatment. As I mentioned before, the location is at the East 55th right now. So Oriana House currently operates the center right across the street. This was a fairly vacant building of theirs that we'll be using for the next 2 years. And currently, Mike Devers' Public Works Group and some others are doing a really great job of rehabbing that facility and getting it ready for us. The next steps from where we're at right now is, as I mentioned before, as we're planning the center that's to open up in April of this year, we're also looking for an opportunity to build a new center. While we're starting with 50 beds, our hope is that we would increase back to that 150 beds that we initially, when Pulitzer did an assessment, that they thought would be a good number for countywide diversion annually. We are working with providers right now so that they're ready to operate the center. There's an RFP that's currently, it was released this week. It's due back in March of this year. That RFP, we're calling for aftercare services. So as I mentioned, the individual will stay at the diversion center for 5 to 7 days and be transferred to another facility to finish out their treatment. The Adams Board currently supports countywide individuals who may not have Medicaid or insurance and would like to get into treatment. And so our intention is to, when they are transferred out of the diversion into a residential, have. So to add in additional providers is one component. Secondly, we want to make sure that at no time, sometimes with Adam's contracts, understandably, there's not a bed available. It might be a very busy weekend or whatever the case. And so there's a set number of beds that the county is asking to hold at these facilities. Not a huge number, but at selected facilities, so that we can make sure if we ever need a bed to transfer someone, that those beds would be available for the individuals. As a side note, in addition to those aftercare services, the RFP that's out right now also gives some residential or mental health treatment providers an opportunity to, if necessary, they can make a request for one-time funding to support their need. So what I had heard often from some of the really successful treatment facilities throughout the county is we're at capacity. We'd love to continue to participate or participate with the county, but we're at capacity. So there's an opportunity for them to request, for example, one-time capital funding, not huge amounts from what I've heard, but one-time capital funding from the county in order to do that expansion. And then again, we could contract with them for using their beds for the diversion center that I mentioned. Let's see, their final slide, we have been actively pursuing other opportunities to support funding. We did receive recently a second State of Ohio capital grant for $1 million to help with build out of a new facility. We had previously also received approximately $700,000 for capital and build out services. And myself and Chief of Staff Mason and the executive and others are looking for other opportunities to raise some support funding for individuals throughout the county and the community that would support this program and could help us with the capital costs for a new center. Again, the East 55th location will have immediately available to us, but we're limited in some of the flexibility as well as size at that location. So in approximately 2 years, having a new facility that we built to the needs that we have, as well as opportunities for expansion in space, could really be the ideal situation for us. That's a quick nutshell. I don't know, Curtis, if you had anything to add about where we're at or where we're going.
I think we have one more slide, Brandy, I believe, after this one. The RFQ. Oh, okay, that's it. No, okay, that was it. Okay, all right. Brandy did great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Am I allowed to ask questions, Jeff?
If people have questions.
This is Public Defender Colin Sweeney. I did have a question. What are the criteria for what sort of charges would be eligible for diversion, and who makes that decision? Is it just the police officer? Is it in consultation with a prosecutor? And then finally, how do we ensure that it's equitably applied and throughout the county?
So great question. So we have early on in this process met with the county prosecutor's office, Prosecutor O'Malley, Chief of Staff Lisa Williamson, and some of their staff, and they're currently working on some baseline entries. Obviously, there's it would be different needs throughout the county depending on the jurisdiction. But for example, we've been very successful other places throughout the U.S. Things where someone may not have a criminal history at all. They might have a trespassing is something that I've seen often with diversion. So no criminal history, no violent, and trespassing occurred. Something of that nature may in fact be, a baseline entry. However, as you well know, every situation is going to be different. And so we'll try and, as easy as possible, put those that almost seem no-brainers, so to speak, but the rest, there's, depending on the individual and their background, those decisions would have to be made.
And are they going to be made just by the officer, or are they going to consult with a county prosecutor or something like that to make a decision whether this should be pre-arrest diversion?
So those are some of the conversations we're having. Ideally, we would like to see through the central booking process and what the group is working through now and expansion of hours, that also at that desk would be, you know, city or county prosecutor's office, an individual who could help make that decision, especially on some of the not so clear-cut cases. So they would also be part of that process, in addition to, as I mentioned, the individual on the helpline from Frontline Services, who's helping more on a behavioral social health aspect.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to have to move this along. Thank you very much, Brandy. Appreciate it. We'll obviously have a lot more on diversion in the future, but we're going to have to move our agenda here. So if we can do a move to central booking, and Bob Corey and Mike Dover, if we could just do a very quick update on what's going on with central booking.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Before you is a picture of what central booking, the design is going to look like down in P1, the current Sally Port. We're basically going to be expanding that space down there to accommodate central booking. We've retained the services of Ozane Bowen back in February of 2020. We have a contract amendment that's currently before County Council in the Public Safety Committee, which will be before them for consideration actually next Tuesday for $3.2 million for the guaranteed maximum price. That's really all I have on it, Jeff. I'll turn it over to Bob to give an overview of policy and procedure.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll try to keep it tight. So the mission of central booking, the focus of this is to look at the processes that are particularly at arrest and through arraignment. And then what we want to be able to do, as consistent with Brandy outlined, is that when they are arrested and brought to the jail Sally Port, that we divert from the criminal justice system when appropriate those individuals who should have gone to our shiny new diversion center as appropriate. And that when they come in, all the players are available that can ensure that they're charged justly and properly, provided defense attorneys for indigent counsel at the earliest opportunity, and released, this is the bond information, on the least costly financial and least restrictive other conditions, but to ensure public safety and appearance at court. So in that slide, you see central booking includes all the justice stakeholders you see there. And we believe that these individuals are necessary early in the process, at the moment of arrest, to make better and more informed decisions, more timely decisions related to that arrest. And as we talked about, diversion, charging when necessary, and release of arrestees from custody, whether because of a no charge situation or quickly making bond on the very same day that they were brought into the Sally Port in the jail. So to do this effectively, central booking eliminates the current linear criminal justice steps with delays in between each of those. The agencies we talked about include the folks you see in that list. Each of those agencies is fully engaged in the process. And we've now been meeting together weekly, and separate work groups have been gathering as they work through interdependencies that they have between each other and their processors, and their interdependencies of resources that they might share. So we're going to develop an overall process from arrest to release or commitment into the jail. And some of the agencies you see there have already well developed their procedures, resource requirements, and interagency requirements. For example, the Sheriff's Department Corrections, I know Ron is on the call, and the Sheriff is on the call, have well developed and have been engaged in the planning. And if we can go to the next slide. Oh, you're already on that interim. Okay, there you go. Didn't see you over there. So they've all well developed in the plans, because the plans need to be able to support each of the processes there, from initial reception and medical screening you see at the top, from law enforcement workrooms so that they can prepare their reports before they ever leave the Sally Port in the jail, so that a prosecutor, both the city and the county prosecutor, can review these reports, depending upon whether it's a misdemeanor or felony, so that they can quickly together make appropriate charging decisions, bond recommendations, and bond decisions. That the pretrial services you see at the top of that screen, that common pleas, pretrial services are now brought right into the Sally Port so that they can do interviews to determine, right, not only they can recognize mental health needs, but they can quickly identify whether or not, if they're going to be charged with a felony, which of the specialty courts they should be diverted to. Data sharing requirements among the stakeholders are necessary to support the operational plan. There's a work group that has already been developed and have already begun to identify existing data fields in the various criminal justice systems that will assist the decision-making I've already discussed. So those data systems include like the jail IMAC system, Cleveland Police Department's LERM system, Common Police Clerk of Court, et cetera. We've already identified an existing tool that can cheaply, or strike that, inexpensively aggregate the data. The county prosecutors already has this well-developed tool and has been using it with all of us as the stakeholders successfully. It's a Microsoft Power BI tool, and we would aggregate key information such as inmate booking number, booking time, current location of the process, so that people can see and aggregate it as somebody comes into the Sally Port, when they came in, what time they were in there, what charge they were initially brought in on, if not ultimately charged. We're meeting every Wednesday, and I believe at the next meeting, Common Pleas and the jail will further report out on the processes that as they see them. That's all I have now, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Any questions quickly on interim? Obviously, there's a lot more to be said about this, and this will be integrated into what we do as we start the jail planning. And once again, the focus, while the building is important, the construction, the focus is really on the process. And we don't have time to talk about it now, but that'll be a continuing, very large part of our conversation going forward. So if we could then, Andy, move on to the next slide. What we are now going to do is talk a little bit about, and we are behind schedule as usual, so I'm going to ask people to move quickly. But I just want Andy to just in the quickest possible way talk about what our next steps are going to be for court facilities planning. And Andy, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Thanks, Jeff. Initially, the steering committee adopted 4 options for continued study because they were based upon what the decision would be on the jail. With the decision to locate the jail on a campus or a different site, we now have 2 options. One is option 2A, to relocate and expand in place with the removal of the jail, or to build a new courthouse on a new site in the downtown area. So what we're projecting to do, we've already started to restart to update the options, cost, and to look at cost reduction options. Our schedule that we're proposing for the court is the week of 3/1 and 3/8. We want to have working group meetings with each individual stakeholder, as we did when we finalized the program for the facility. We'll be starting to schedule those next week. So we'll take a week to a week and a half to do those meetings, and as usual, we will try to set up our meetings with the judiciary over the lunch hour as we did during programming. Following that, we will report out to the executive committee to determine a course of action for a steering committee, and come back to this steering committee towards the end of March, now targeted for the 25th, to go over the results and findings and what the potential actions are for determination to move forward with the courts in tandem with the jail. Jeff, anything else you'd like to add?
No, and once again, this is the first time we've publicly talked about that possible 3/25 date. We'll come back to that. Obviously, that could be subject to change based upon some scheduling, but that's at least a target right now for what we're trying to do. It's going to be important not just for what we're trying to do with respect to the courts, but to where we're going to be in the jail process at that time. So let's then move on, Andy, to the next slide. Where we are right now is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about process, but we have, as a group, been working through in fine detail what to do about the jail. And on several occasions, we've been back to the steering committee and we've talked programmatically in general terms. We've talked about the things that we should implement. We've talked about the size constraints, and our programming team has been working in great detail with with focus with the groups involved with jail management and jail facilities. So we are now at the point where we have a preliminary program. This is the next critical step, having this program, because until you have that program, you really can't go out to the criteria architect to start designing, and you really can't figure out exactly what you need to match up with your site. So what I'm going to have Andy do right now is give an overview of the jail program, which is really, it says final, but it's final for purposes of what our programming team done. It's still preliminary in our process. And then I'm going to tell you that there's an extensive document that backs all this up. It will be then made available, not just to the steering committee, it will be posted. So this is going to be a public record, but Andy's going to walk you through it right now.
Would you start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're going to start, Curtis? Okay, that's fine.
We're doing it together.
Okay.
Again, this has been thank you, everybody. This has been a long process. We actually started it probably about 18 months ago, and I want to thank Rhonda and her team. They've been integral to the success of this program document, so hats off to them. So what are the key attributes of the jail program? Again, what you're going to see, these bullet points here, and I won't read them all. You got to remember, none of this really exists in the current jail today. We have a very inefficient facility that cannot bring programs and services to the offender population, cannot provide the appropriate treatment. So this is going to be a new paradigm, as we've said before in some of our other meetings. So the populations we're dealing with, obviously general populations, special management, but a big focus on healthcare, medical treatment, and mental health treatment. These are things we just do not have today. You just heard Mike and Bob talk about the current interim booking. Well, we're going to have a much larger intake center in the new facility, again, with this very strong focus on diversion and expediting processing of offenders coming in, arrestees coming in, to hopefully get them through the process and out the door before they even get put into the jail itself. The facility is being based on direct supervision, which is the best practices model for operating jails. It's been around for 35 plus years and very successful. And the key here is also bringing service delivery to the housing units to minimize movement of inmates and also be staff efficient. One of the biggest problems today in the jail is that we can't get inmates to recreation. We can't get them to programs. Everything has to be moved. Every inmate has to be moved from A to B to C. Here, all the services will be brought directly to the inmate population and be able to provide a way expanded delivery of service model. The housing will be grouped in clusters, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And the Part T for the facility basically looks at developing a typical design concept so that wherever the officer may be working, it'll be a similar type of housing unit. It'll be a focus on environmental and biophilic design, wellness, acoustics, lighting, natural light. These are all important for the offender population and very important for staff wellness. We want staff to make this facility a place they want to go to work in the morning. What you see in front of you is just, we call it bed distribution. Just what it is. Basically, there are 17 different classifications of offenders, and that's actually times 2 because we have male and female. So it's very complicated. We worked out all the different bed breakdowns, working very closely with Rhonda and her team. And most importantly, again, we said the target is a 1,600 bed facility with an operating capacity, initial operating capacity of 1,350.
And to add to what Curtis is saying, that's why the continued focus of the county on population management, diversion, and other activities is critical because this is a lower average daily population than the current jail.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Good point, Andy. Yep.
Yeah, the one point I'm going to make, and I'm going to make this repeatedly, we are not there now. We have to get there and have to have the plan in order to continue programming at this level. And quite honestly, even at this level, it is a very expensive jail. To even go beyond this and bring the population down lower could have huge economic benefits for the county. So driving the number down continues to be the number one focus in my view. But go ahead, Curtis.
Absolutely. So we've organized the housing into I said earlier, clusters. So what does a cluster mean? It's a grouping of housing units, anywhere from about 250 to 300 offenders. They're organized around decentralized services, and most importantly, a span of control, so that every cluster, you can see sort of illustration on the left side of your screen, is managed by in a decentralized management perspective, so that there's to be an officer who's a supervisor of that particular area. Think of it almost like a little mini jail. And we have 7 of them, and they're organized by specialty areas. We have a reception cluster. So what's special about that? Well, that's where classification will occur. That's where video arraignment will occur. We have a mental health cluster. That's where specialized treatment for offenders with mental health treatment will occur. And then we have the general population clusters. And all together, we run them having 7 clusters in the new facility. How big is the jail going to be? Well, the facility is planned, as I said, with a 1,600-bed initial capacity with an average daily population of 1,350. We have over-designed the core. When I say the core, everything but the housing, to allow the facility to accommodate up to 2,400 with an average daily population of 2,040 if necessary. But our goal, as Jeff has said, that's not where we want to be. We want to, keep the population, at 1,350 or lower as we successfully implement diversion programs over the next couple of years. But bottom line, we're talking about a facility of about 783,000 square feet. And it's important to note that we also have a huge amount of outdoor area. The housing, if you see exterior square footage for number 8, which is the housing, we have almost 23,000 square feet dedicated to outdoor exercise space. Every housing unit will have its own exercise area so that offenders can go out to those areas, get their mandated recreation, but not only that, they could go there all day long. As long as the door's open, they can in and out, and it's an extension of the day room space. This is a huge paradigm change from the current jail where you have to be escorted to recreation.
And to inform your discussion as you go into executive session, we've looked at 2 different site configurations. This is actually mislabeled. This is the 1-level scheme, which is 50 to 60 acres. This is based upon if we built the jail horizontally. You can see from the diagram the repetitive nature of, even though each of these housing units is different, some are dormitories, some are double-celled, some are single-celled, that notion of having a common partee. There's some advantages to this, but there's some disadvantages in terms of not only site size, but distances for moving around. The alternative is to go to no more than a 2/2 scheme. Our discussions with corrections focused on the fact that they do not prefer a vertical scheme because of movement, because of response times. In a 2/2 schemes, we can have monumental stairs so staff can still move without elevators, can respond as needed. It significantly reduces the site area to about 25 to 30 acres and should also have some reduced cost in terms of site development, construction costs, maintenance, and utilities. And one of the most critical issues when you look at this is not just the site size, but the travel distances. A single level jail of this size spread out so that we can have windows for every offender room, et cetera, ends up having over a mile of circulation corridors. So it's quite a distance for response, for movement of food, for movement of laundry. Remember, everything for the offender population is at the housing unit or cluster. So we no longer move people to recreation. We no longer move people to visiting. We no longer move people to programs. Everything is delivered to them, but we still need to be able to move food, laundry, and emergency services to the housing units. So we provided these 2 illustrations simply to help to inform the steering committee's deliberations regarding potential sites. Any questions on the program?
one thing I will point out, I just want everyone to understand before we move in, both of these configurations include all of the elements we've talked about. They both include parking, for example. They both include the ability to house and maintain the buses that we will need for transportation. And the goal here, and by the way, there's nothing that says that you can't do the larger site, but with the configuration that could fit on a 25 to 30 acre site and then have additional space for other uses. One thing that we have not done with this program, there is a separate program for the sheriff's facility. It's about, I think, 90,000 square feet. We have not dictated anything about where the sheriff's facility goes. It could go, and it could make sense to go adjacent to or on the same site where you locate the jail. The sheriff also, of course, services the courts downtown. There are different opportunities for where the sheriff is, and we have not dictated where, at this point in time, where the sheriff's facility belongs, but it is programmed to go somewhere, obviously. Any questions, generally speaking, about this program? And I know we've talked a lot about it in meetings and in other sessions, but are there any questions right now about the program for Andy or Curtis? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So with that in mind, let me take a minute, and thank you, Andy. And once again, we will have lots of time to go through this. We'll have lots of time to confirm this and to work through it. So let me just explain a little bit about where we are right now. And then we will, in a minute, I'll take a motion of the committee. So where we are right now is with this programmatic phase completed, with the decision that we have already made to go to a new site to replace Jail 1 and Jail 2, with the program that has been designed to go on that site, including the idea of a core space capable of doing from 1,600 to 2,400 housed individuals, although the initial design will be for no more than 1,600 housing units, subject to change, of course. With that in mind, we have our program complete. So we are now in the process of doing two things. There's actually a third that comes aboard with this. But number one, there is right now with the county a draft of a criteria architect RFQ. There's an internal county process that goes with it, but it has been drafted, and it is, as soon as the county is done going through its internal process, it will go out on the street to select a criteria architect who will implement this plan for us. And that involves several steps, but some of them are initial confirmation of this program. And then as we work down the site evaluation process to work with us in the more detailed review of possible sites for a site fit with the plan, so that we ultimately select the site and continue on with the design process with the steering committee's continued involvement. As soon as that criteria architect is selected, and that this is a qualifications-based selection process, there will be steering committee input on that selection. There will be steering committee input in the interview process, which we'll get into. But as soon as that is done, we will immediately go out and select the design builder through an RFP process, because we want all players on board as early as possible as we work through this process. And there'll be a lot more about that process in our next meeting as we move forward. But the RFQ will be distributed for review by the steering committee. So you'll see that as it goes out. Site evaluation. So the process right now has been the following. Number one, the county has engaged a consultant to assist with locating possible sites. And the mission was, the consultant has taken our initial criteria that we developed, the selection criteria that you all saw, that you all approved of. You may recall that was the scoring sheet that had the different criteria with red light, orange light, and green light. And based on that, and based also on what you have seen just in terms of acreage, in other words, either 25 to 30 acres minimum for one option or over 50 acres for the second option, that consultant has been charged with locating possible sites for consideration, not to specifically rank, but to simply group them into sites that should be looked at for further consideration. We did have one initial meeting of a subcommittee to try to just look at them and provide input. We will go into executive session in a few minutes to do exactly the same thing with the larger committee and to look at these sites. I want to comment on a couple things. The goal is not to select the site with this at this point. The goal is to narrow the focus and then take some select sites, the better sites, the sites that look more promising, and then do further investigation of those sites. Now, I want to go back to the public comment we heard at the beginning of the meeting. Although there are a series of criteria, and I don't remember how many there were, but it's 20 or some of those criteria. And although for each criteria there's a ranking, there has been no there's been no forced ranking as to which criteria are most important. In other words, right now we're not saying criteria A is more important than criteria B is more important than criteria C. We've simply listed all the possible criteria in order to get evaluations. We will want input on that criteria. And so in terms of public engagement, the concept would be to have a public meeting, and we're of course not going to discuss any specific sites with the public. Can't do that. When we get to a specific site, we will then, because we're going to have to talk about it with that neighborhood, and there'll be an engagement around the meaning of a jail in that area. But we certainly will do a public engagement meeting where we are going to present the criteria and get feedback as to relative weightings of these criteria. What is important to the community? What are their thoughts about the criteria and about what should be important in selecting the ultimate site? So we'll have that public engagement meeting, and that's one thing that we'll recommend and plan to do. Ultimately, when a specific site is located, there's obviously going to be a lot of work around, impact and discussion with the neighborhood. So that's all ahead of us. And the other thing, of course, that we talk about is overall project financing, the ultimate legal work that has to be done, and the deals made as to who's in that building, et cetera. So that's what's next. But right now, what I'd like to do, if I can have the executive committee or the steering committee go off of mute for a second. And I think we can do this by a voice vote, but it is appropriate as we move into executive session, first of all, for me to have someone from the committee make a motion to move into the here's the process. We have asked for a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of considering real estate issues. We take a second, there's a vote. We have to have a majority vote of the committee to do that. So do I hear a motion for someone to move into executive session?
So moved.
Okay, we have several. I see Mike Gallagher. I'm going to pick him as the person who made the motion. Okay. And second?
Second, it's Naila.
Okay, Naila, a second. And let's just take by voice vote. All in favor of moving into the executive committee, say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Hearing none, here's what we're going to do right now.
Hey, Jeff, can you list who's on the executive committee so the public knows?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I will do this again. And we did take the roll call vote at the beginning, but the members who are here on the committee, we have, I'll just go through this quickly. We have the representative of, in no particular order, of Mayor Jackson, which is Barbara Langhenry. We have the county executive. We have the representative of the county sheriff. We have Cleveland City Council president. We have both the city and the county clerk of courts who are here. Kim Bates representing the city, and Nyla Bird, who's here for the county. We have the county prosecutor. We have the public defender, county council president, representative, the sheriffs. I think I said that the sheriff's representative, and then we have the three judges of the three courts who are who are currently committed to be within this project, which is our common pleas court judge, our Judge Celebrezzi with the domestic relations court, and Judge Early with the Cleveland Municipal Court. I think I got everybody on that list.
Jeff?
This is Brendan Sheehan from Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. I'm here.
Yes, Judge Shane's here.
Right.
Yeah, I indicated him by roll. I didn't call out his name.
Jeff, Mike Dever here. We need to do a roll call on the vote to go into executive session, so please do so.
Okay. I will do that. So let's go back to the list again. Barbara Lang-Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Budish?
Yes.
Let's see. Let me just see something here. Okay. Kim Bates?
Yes.
Mike Gallagher?
Yes.
For the sheriff?
Yes.
Okay, that's Bob Curry. For Kevin Kelly?
Yes.
Colin Sweeney?
Yes.
Michael Malley?
Yes.
Judge Sheehan?
Yes.
Judge Celebrezzi?
Jim Zach for Judge
Or
Celebrezzi.
Jim Zach? And you said yes, right?
Yes.
Who did I skip?
Judge Early.
Skipped me.
Oh, Judge Early. I'm sorry, Judge Early.
And
And
Nyla
you
Bird.
skipped the clerk. And you skipped the clerk of court.
Okay,
Nyla Bird.
Nyla Bird.
No, Nyla Bird.
Yes, Nyla Bird. I'm sorry. And you said
Okay.
yes.
I did.
You
Okay.
have everyone,
Did I
Jeff.
get every? Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't have the list right in front of me. Okay, thank you. With that in mind, here's what we're going to do. It's going to take me a second because I have a lot of new names. So just leave any. So here's what I'm going to say. Anybody who is not designated to go into executive committee, and you know who you are, you can sign out. Anybody else, just stay signed in. I will be moving you into a breakout room. Take a 5-minute break while I do this. And when you come back, you will be in the breakout room for our executive session. Okay? Very good. Okay. I think we have everyone back. So we are now returning from our executive session to our general session. Steve Zanoni, do you have any more comment?
No, I do not. We did not receive any more public comments.
Okay, so there are no more public comments. I will make one announcement then, and that is that tentatively the next steering committee meeting will be March 25 at 9 a.m. We will still be in this same mode, using the same procedures. And once again, in advance of that meeting, there will be an agenda posted, and we'll provide the same notifications as we have in the past. So with that in mind, is there a motion to conclude today's meeting?
Jeff, you needed to make a motion to come out.
One.
Jeff, a motion had to be made to come out.
Seconded?
Second.
All approve?
Aye.
Aye.
And I think that's unanimous. So with that in mind, I appreciate it. We will be posting this video will be posted, and the PowerPoint will be posted, and